Hello, friends. I'm David Hale. Welcome to Soul Shift Coaching, where I'm responding to a new call on my life to pass on that which has freely been given to me, and that is a life of transformation, a transformed mindset as a result of knowing peace, understanding freedom, and bringing peace and freedom together and applying them daily through discipline and reaping that radical harvest of transformation that is always on the other side of discipline. So thank you for being here. Today, what do I want to talk about? Why is change so difficult? Why is lasting, permanent change so difficult? What I've seen in my own life and in other people's lives, and there are some numbers to back this up, that roughly 10% of people get changed and stay changed. You know those people. There's only a handful of them. One day they're like that. The next day they were like this, and then they just stayed like this. Why did they stay changed? Most of us, the vast majority of us, we are those New Year's resolution bubbas, right? We get into the gym, January and February, we're all hot to trot. And so by the time we get to the end of March, definitely by April Fool's Day, that's the time to start going to the gym because all the New Year's resolution bubbas are cleared out. We don't want that here. We want you to have lasting, permanent change. So what I want to talk about today is why is change so difficult? In my humble opinion, I know there are others, but this is what I have experienced personally and seen in others people's lives as I've led them down this path of transformation, been honored and blessed to lead them. A couple weeks back, I was flying back east for a wedding. I was fortunate enough to attend, and I live in sunny San Diego. And as we came up out of the clouds and banked left to head both north and east, I settled into my chair. I got my little club soda and opened up my book and just fell into reading my book. And then, I don't know, maybe 30, 45 minutes into the flight, pilot comes on the intercom and says, "Hey, for those of you on the left side of the plane, why don't you take a gander out the window?" And there it was, the entire Grand Canyon just laid out in front of us. It was early morning, mid-morning, so the sun was rising. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and it was just beautiful. It was awesome. My family and I had been there a couple of years prior, so to see it from 30,000 foot was fantastic. The power, the rawness, the depth, the windingness, the grandeur, just the raw power of it just gave me pause. And it was in that moment of pause that I was reminded, you know what? That Grand Canyon is a perfect representation, analogy, metaphor, symbol of all of my old thoughts, response muscles, and patterns of behavior. For years and years before I got launched down this path of transformation, I was battling a Grand Canyon of old thoughts and behaviors, unhealthful thoughts, detrimental behaviors, and weak response muscles, or response muscles that were built in the wrong direction. And that is why change is so tough, lasting change. And that is why only 10% of people get changed and stay changed. And I'll continue to unpack that. What do I mean? The reason that we have a Grand Canyon of unhealthful thoughts, detrimental thoughts, thoughts that keep us stuck, two primary reasons in my humble opinion. I'm sure there are others, but these are the ones like I've said, I've experienced and seen in others. First and foremost, why do I have this Grand Canyon so deep and so winding of old thoughts, unhealthful behaviors, and response muscles that are having me respond in the wrong way? Because remember, the only thing we can control in this life is our response to it. So why this Grand Canyon of old thoughts and behaviors and patterns? Well, two primary reasons in my humble opinion. One, because we grew up in a family of dysfunction. I made a video about this recently. No one gets out of here without that fact. It's not a question of if there was dysfunction. The simple question is to which degree. Some of us less than others. Some folks, unfortunately, were way on that significant side and had to deal with really traumatic events, verbal, mental, sometimes, unfortunately, physical abuse, and everywhere in between, right? No one gets out of here without growing up in a family of dysfunction. And so as we're growing up in that system of dysfunction, what we do is we build coping mechanisms. We build coping skills to keep us safe. Because the formative years, science tells us, is roughly 6 to 10. Well, when you're 6 to 10 years old, do you really know anything? No, but you do have that fight or flight, right? You do have those natural intrinsic emotions that make your antenna go up. And man, you know when things aren't right. And so what we do growing up in that system of dysfunction, depending on how dysfunctional it was, we build coping mechanisms. We build coping skills to keep us safe because we don't know what else to do. And then what our mind and body and spirit tells us, or at least our mind and body for sure, is like, hey, when this happened last time, you did this and it kept you safe. Or when this happened last time, you did that or said that and it kept you safe. And so what we do is we do it out of sheer survival. And what happens is over time, as we continue to live in that system of dysfunction, we keep doing the same things over and over again because it works. And what neuroscience has told us, they've told us many things, of course, and I'm no scientist, but I have picked up a nugget of truth along the way, that when we think thoughts, those electrical impulses actually create grooves or paths in our brains. And the more we have the same thought, the deeper and more well-worn that path becomes. And so as we're growing up in this system of dysfunction and we're constantly responding to events to keep ourselves safe, and we build those coping mechanisms and coping skills, we have all those thoughts that are going on at the same time. And they're just creating a very well-worn path, like the Grand Canyon. A primary driver of the forging of the depth and the windingness of our Grand Canyon of old thoughts and patterns of behaviors is because we had to learn how to grow up in a family of dysfunction. So that's the first one. The second one is that as you scan back over your life, we all have them, whether it's 1 or 2 or 5 or 10. We all have those, what I call external shocks to our world. Maybe it's the death of a loved one, a divorce of parents, a financial stress, whatever it is. We all have those external shocks that come into our lives where it just forces us to see everything. We viewed the world this way one day and literally we viewed it a different way the next because of this external shock that came into our world. And so what happens is when those external shocks come, what do you think we do? What is our default position? What is our default response? Well, we're going to revert back to what's been working for us. Those coping skills, coping mechanisms, those response muscles we have built to deal with traumatic events. And so what that external shock does is it puts those coping skills on steroids. And so let's just say, right, you grew up a family as dysfunction, your formative years, like they all say, is 6 to 10. Let's say your parents got divorced when you're at 12. Well, what you're going to do when you're 12 is you're going to revert back to those coping skills that have been working for you. And it's just going to put those coping skills on steroids. And then what neuroscience has also told us is that the average person has roughly 6,000 thoughts a day. 6,000, my friends. Easy math tells us that's 180,000 thoughts a month and well over 2 million thoughts a year. Let's say your parents got divorced at 12 and now you're 32, so 20 years has elapsed. Well, 20 years times 2 million thoughts a year, that's 40 million thoughts. If that was a true external shock, man, external shocks rock you to your core, right? They just settle deep and everything is impacted by it. Everything you do and say and speak is impacted by it at one time or another. And so if you've lived 20 years, and you've had over 40 million thoughts, how many of those thoughts were related to directly or indirectly to that external shock? 10%? 10% of the 40 million thoughts is 4 million thoughts. Let's just be conservative and let's cut that in half. Let's say the 4 million actually becomes 2 million. Well, my dear friend, over the last 20 years, you've had 2 million thoughts directly or indirectly associated with that external shock. And because it rocks us so deep and because it settles down so far into our very being, man, we've got 2 million thoughts of just driving and forging that Grand Canyon of old thoughts and old behaviors and building response muscles that cause us to respond unhealthfully. So we grow up in a system of dysfunction and we learn coping skills. And then we have external shocks, and those external shocks put those coping skills on steroids. And because those coping skills were learned when we were 6 to 10 and we don't know anything and we just do it out of sheer survival, they're not all healthful. And so what we do is over time, we have more and more thoughts, more and more of the same thoughts, creating and forging just a deeper and deeper and more winding and winding path of that Grand Canyon of old thoughts, behaviors, and patterns. And that's why, my friends, it is so difficult to stay changed, to maintain change, to be permanently changed. Because after a week or a day or a month or 100 days, it's really, really difficult to forge a brand new path. I mean, how many years and how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and for some of us, millions of thoughts forging that Grand Canyon of old thoughts. We've got to change it. We've got to step down this new path. We've got to leave that Grand Canyon of old thoughts behind. And I've got 2 tools, my friends, 2 tools to think about as you start to forge this new path, these new paths of new thoughts and new responses. First and foremost, my friends, we must understand that we are mind, body, and spirit in constant relationship with ourselves. And what those old Grand Canyon thoughts did is that it was dominated by our mind or our feelings, our body. Our mind and our body dominated the creation of that old Grand Canyon. And what we need to do, dear friends, is we need to slow down and quiet down and let our spirit be the driving force behind the creation of the new canyon of healthful thoughts, the new canyon of power and resiliency and recreation. Because remember, my dear friends, each and every day, we are creating our future self. And the way we can create our future self and stay on the path of transformation, that's what we want. We don't want to quit after 1 day, 7 days, 90 days, or 6 months. We want to stay on this path. And the only way we get the power and the endurance and the perseverance to stay on this path is to connect our spirit to the eternal. Because the eternal is eternal. It never peters out. We peter out. Our mind quits. Our body gives up. That's that old stuff. We want this new. We want this new power. So we got to connect our spirit to the eternal. And one of the ways we do that, my friends, is we pick a particular word for this season. A word that connects our spirit to the eternal. A word that we meditate on, abide in, and chew on as we constantly create our future self of who we want to be. Maybe some of you are harboring unforgiveness. And so the word of your season as you forge this new path and you walk and stay on this path of transformation is forgiveness. And you are constantly seeing yourself in a state of abundant forgiveness. Maybe you need to forgive yourself. A lot of us do. Or you need to forgive someone else. And so forgiveness becomes the word of the season. And every time you get tired and frustrated and angry at doing it day in and day out, and you're lost in the weeds and you're lost in the trees, see that forgiveness that touches your spirit because you are seeing who you are creating each and every day. That word, forgiveness, will connect you to the eternal, and it will raise your eyes and get you out of the busyness of the day-to-day and the drudgery of the day-to-day and the difficulty of the day-to-day. And you can be pulled forward as your spirit connects to the eternal with that constant meditation on forgiveness, if that is your word. Maybe beauty is your word of the season. Beauty of a restored relationship. Beauty of a healthful person. You know, there's just something attractive. And I'm not talking about a magazine cover. I'm talking about that humble confidence of the beauty of a person that is humble and confident because they know they have been pulled through life as they've connected with the eternal. The beauty of a restored relationship. Maybe your word that connects your spirit to the eternal is innocence. Maybe what draws you forward and pulls you forward is that you want to try to capture that innocence before that external shock came. As you look back over your life and you go, oh man, I remember me before that event. I want a taste of that. I want to get back to that. You can, friends. You can create your future self and you can tap back into that innocence and you can connect your spirit to the eternal through the word innocence. And every time you see a baby or every time you see the child, it reminds you to meditate on that innocence, and it pulls you forward down this path of transformation. My friends, we are mind, body, and spirit. And that old Grand Canyon of thoughts was dominated by our mind and our body. We've got to leave that be and let our spirit pull for us, and let our spirit connect to the eternal, and have our spirit inform our mind and our body. Because if our spirit is pulling our mind and our body through, we won't grow weary. We won't get lost in the weeds and get lost in the trees. We will be pulled with our eyes forward, constantly creating our future self one day at a time. That's one of the ways, dear friends, that we combat that old Grand Canyon. I'm going to have to make a second video on the second tool that we can use to combat that Grand Canyon of old ideas and forge a brand new one and stay on this path of transformation, because that's what I want for you, my friends. I want transformation. I want you to know peace. I want you to understand true freedom, and I want you to bring peace and freedom together and apply it through daily discipline as you walk this path of transformation, which is always on the other side of discipline. That's it, friends. If you've liked this content, please give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And please also subscribe to the channel where you can see other content that I've posted. You can also see the description box below other places to find me, like soulshift.org, my coaching site, where you can learn more about me, my approach, and my style. And you can also go to the book coaching link and book a free consultation where you and I can connect and learn about who you are, where you are, how you got there, and who you might want to become, because I'd be honored and privileged to help guide you on this path of transformation. Because remember, friends, there is always a radical harvest of transformation on the other side of discipline. Thank you for being here.